On this episode, the guys discuss the topic of conspiracies. Why do people like them so much? And what's a healthy way to approach them? There's a lot to unpack, and we have a special guest named Ethan who's in the studio to share his knowledge as well. You're going to get all this, plus we finally get to know what Rosey thinks about Liberace. So sit back, grab a coffee, and enjoy.
You're listening to the All Out War podcast.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of All Out War Podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Turner, and I'm sitting across from Steven, a.k.a. Rosey. What's up, Rosey?
Hey, what's up?
How you doing, brother?
Good. Did you know that Liberace was a member of the Church of Satan?
I did not know that Liberace was a church. I knew his music was satanic, but I didn't know he was from Satan.
Yeah.
Great.
I'm
Cody,
doing good.
how are you doing?
He's dead, but yeah, I mean, he was really dead, apparently.
Yeah.
I'm good. Everything's good.
Yeah,
I'm
don't
here.
forget to love your mic, man.
I love my mic.
Love your mic, baby. Speak up. Oh, man. Well, we have a great episode today. I'm excited about this episode, as I am every episode, as you guys can tell. But we're going to be talking about something that I really don't know a whole lot about, but I do enjoy talking about it because it really stems deep back from my history from fifth grade. It would be the year of 1978.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, before you guys, 20 years before you guys ever walked the planet. But I was at a book club. We'd have these book fairs, and I remember our class was walked down to the library in line. We go to the library, and you could buy a book, and my mom had given me some money for a book, and the book that I picked up that I wanted to buy was a book that had to deal with Bigfoot, with UFOs, and with Loch Ness Monster.
Nessie.
Nessie, yeah, also known as Nessie. And I remember I took that book home, and it was creepy and scary and a little bit, kind of just dark and mysterious, but I loved it. And I don't know, I always had this interest in the unknown, right? The mysteries of the unknown, right? But and that's exactly what our topic is tonight. We're going to be talking about conspiracies, conspiracy theories. We're going to be talking about things that are coming through our government and other type of things that, honestly, all of us have done a little bit of research. We're all bringing something to the table for the conversation, and so we're going to do that. And one of the reasons that we wanted to talk about this is there was a person that was pretty influential for me to talk about these things because he actually has wisdom. He thinks it out, and he's a guest that we have in the studio today. And it's my brother Ethan Hardy. What's up?
Hey, how's it going?
Good, man. We are so glad that you are in the studio with us today to do this podcast episode because you and I have had conversations, and I've sat outside of you in conversations with guys, with Cody and other people that we know, and it's always intriguing, it's always interesting and fun, and you have this little part of your personality that some people may not know that you really do enjoy to debate. And
or also people also call it enjoy to get into trouble.
Yeah, well,
so I mean,
when you're dropping truth, people don't like it all the time, but I've known that about you because I've known you since I was your middle school youth pastor. So for
That's
a long,
true.
long time, you were that way. Even back in middle school, you'd ask the tough questions. You always had this mind that wanted to know answers, and that's one of the reasons that I had you on here is just because of the times that we've talked and you've talked about those things. It's always been impressive to me, but also we're a good friend. And I think you're going to contribute to the conversation in a really good way. And so I'm excited to have you here tonight. And we're glad that we finally worked out our schedules and you could make it in. And so let's jump into this topic, man. Let's jump in. I'm going to start right now. So Ethan, you gave me an awesome document, and I'm just going to name a list of some of the things that you put down as conspiracies that interest you.
Yep.
And then after we do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about this whole idea. Like, let's define conspiracy and all that too, to help people get in. But so you wrote down MK Ultra. You wrote down the Dreyfus Affair, the Mafia. I don't know if that's so much a conspiracy.
It was. We'll talk about it. It was. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Operation Mockingbird. We won't obviously get to all of these today. Operation Northward Woods. CIA drug running in L.A. and Arkansas. The Gulf of Tonkin.
Yep.
Atlantis. Bohemian Grove. I hate that thing. Operation Paperclip. which I've been finding out. Then here's one of mine. I like ancient lost technology.
That's one we've talked about before, man.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite ones. Tesla, deep state, demonic possession, oppression, NWO, not the band, Big Brother, shadow governments, dinosaurs, and human coexistence, UFOs, Antarctica, Hollow Earth, Large Hadron Collider, secret government projects like Lockheed Skunk Works, Tesla, etc., and giants in the Smithsonian cover-up. So that's giants in the Smithsonian cover-up sounds like something that you would see on Raiders of the Lost Ark or something.
X-Files, something like that.
right, yeah, right.
It sounds like a folk band,
A folk band?
like a neo folk band.
Patent pending.
Yeah, a bunch of hipsters. I think that'd be a good name.
That would be a good name. All right, let's put a folk band together.
I can't play anything.
Well, folk
You don't
bands
need to.
can't-
You don't need to play anything to be in a funk band, man. You don't need
Funk
to.
or folk?
Yeah, it's the same thing. I don't
Same
care.
thing.
You could play a traffic cone. There are funk bands like that, you know.
Yeah.
Just want to bang on a traffic cone for an hour.
That's so awesome. So let's start with the definition of conspiracy. Who wants to tackle that?
All right, I can throw something out there. So a lot of people don't really understand what conspiracy is, and so the definition of conspiracy is essentially something that is hidden. It doesn't. The definition of conspiracy has nothing to do with being untrue. It just means that something is veiled or hidden.
And a group of people usually conspire,
Correct.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So when you add theory into that obviously then puts another layer of understanding on it. But yeah, it's pretty much just what things that are hidden, which can be a vast array of different things. I mean, you mentioned the mafia in that list. A lot of people don't know that the mafia was a conspiracy theory for the longest time. The idea that a single organization was controlling and causing all of these crimes across cities was unknown for a very long time, and it was whispered about, but it wasn't uncovered until I think it was like the 60s or 70s, something like that. So
I think it's good also to point out that when you say that, there's going to be a whole bunch of people who want to add, and I think you should add, that conspiracy also historically has been associated with evil. To do evil, to do something evil, because to conspire to do something that is hidden, is that you're trying to do something that maybe in the mainstream is nefarious, maybe in the general accepted moral ethic, that it's not what should be, exposed right now.
right, it's hidden for a reason.
And the reason that it's being conspired to come out, or at least those that want to make it a reality, they get demonized. Is another word they use. They get, projected on as these bad actors and these characters that are doing something horrible. And I think there's truth to that, where you do have these horrible, terrible conspiracies that are, plainly just evil. We can get into that. But one of the ones, I know we're probably going to get into more of the topic, but the guy, what's his name? The November 5th.
November 5th.
It's throwing my head off right now.
Guy Fawkes?
Guy Fawkes.
There you go.
Where they were trying
pull,
to...
Rosey. Good pull.
There you go, bro. They were trying to do something that they believed to be a good thing, but the government they were trying to overthrow...
Well, explain who Guy Fawkes is, because I'm
well,
lost.
it's...
November 5th, Guy
the
Fawkes.
idea of it behind it was that they were trying to overthrow the parliament back in England in 1817. I can't remember the years.
All
A
right.
long
Sorry.
time ago.
Okay.
But like the idea that they were doing something that was evil was based off of the ruling class. They were this group that wanted to overthrow the lords and the current monarch. They wanted to take out what they saw as evil.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that in this as well, is that there's some layers to what conspiracy could mean to certain people, specifically those that write history. And when you look back in time, there's a lot of conspiracy theories that are just, they're just part of history, and they're written by those that are victors, and it's like that's not a bad thing. They were trying to expose something that was horrible.
Speaking of writing history, I don't know if you guys knew this, but the negative perspective on conspiracy theories actually was allegedly started by the CIA and the CIA and the NSA right after the Kennedy assassination. So there was a lot of, there's still very a lot of talk about the Kennedy assassination, but this term was brought into the mainstream consciousness by security agencies during the time of the Kennedy assassination.
Then they just declassified all that information like a month ago. I don't know if you saw that.
There's still a lot that's still classified, actually.
really?
Yeah, yeah. They keep on kicking the can another 20 years. Yeah.
There's a reason for that, right?
There is a reason, yeah.
And this is what's so crazy because it's unknown. It's like partial truths, half truths, and all that. That's why it's so intriguing to know all these things, right? We think about them.
Yeah, I was going to say one thing to touch on, like the JFK files are getting declassified. It's really interesting. I was talking to someone that literally every day that there's certain documents. I think it's the year is either 20 or 25 years. The 25 years. Every 25 years to the day, certain files that were classified as top secret or whatever they are go up to a board. There's literally departments that all they do is look at old documents and they say, okay, it's 25 years to the day. Can we declassify it completely? Like, is this relevant? Is it going to cause harm? I don't know. Just for example, if we see some cables or something like that are referencing someone that was undercover or something like that,
methods
like,
or something like
yeah,
that.
like certain things like that, they might say like, okay, that's still classified because we don't want. It would be really embarrassing if some other country found out that we did this 25 years ago and we've been claiming that we never did or something like that. And other stuff gets declassified all the time that is not seen as relevant, or the need for classification doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that they don't publicize anything. They just put it in the Library of Congress, and they just say, here's these documents, we'll put them in the Library of Congress. And you have to actually, you don't need a Freedom of Information Act.
You can just search it, right?
Yeah, but you have to actually go there. The government doesn't publish, as far as I'm aware of, like, these are the things that we declassified today. These are the things we declassified today, like every day. Like, you actually have to go look for them, but they are declassifying files every day. But interesting point, it seems like there are certain groups of people that actually are the ones that are pushing all the Freedom of Information Acts and stuff like that to get stuff that might otherwise be still classified. And it seems like the only two groups are like UFO, extraterrestrial people that are into that. They're always pushing for, we can maybe talk about this a different time, like documents from Majestic 12 and all that stuff. Or
just they want things
or JFK.
to be,
those are like the two big
Yeah.
ones that they know of that
Yeah.
everyone keeps pushing for.
Well, we can talk about this later when we get into the details, but MK Ultra was uncovered via a Freedom of Information request.
Which is what he was getting at.
Yeah.
We had, in another discussion, talked about that, where Bill Clinton actually came out publicly acknowledging it. And actually, there's video. You can go back and watch him apologize specifically for the inhumane acts that they did as the U.S. government towards these test subjects. They apologized for it, and then they went forward and said, "We'll release all the documentation associated with it," which pushed it to 2000 or 2001. And at that point, there was only one computer in a building in Maryland, I believe, where it was the official place that you could come.
always that way, isn't
But it was only from like 11 p.m. to 11 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Yeah.
And then later on, I believe there's another Freedom of Information Act that was passed, or a request that pushed it towards, I think, 2014, where they said now will be every 25 years we'll push out more information and be on a drip. And even further, I think January just of this year, I think you mentioned it earlier, Turner, there was more information that's published.
Yeah.
And it's just like on a daily basis, more things are being published, but you got to physically go and gather it at the location and go
Yeah.
online to these computers.
It's like this slow dribble of information that comes out, and they control how it comes out, so much so that when it is released, you have to be able to put pieces together like a puzzle, because they're not releasing them chronologically. They're not releasing them with information that connects dots very easily. And so you have to do these leap theories, and it causes people to look strange when they're trying to like pack and unpack these things to make them, because like just go back to UFOs for a minute. That's something that I've always, and we've all like this. That's probably the most common
Quintessential
yeah.
conspiracy theories,
It's
UFOs or Bigfoot.
Yeah,
I saw one when I came over.
Bigfoot, my baby. I love Bigfoot. He's like my favorite. I can't wait to see him someday. But because I believe
there's like a coming day.
I'm just kidding.
We'll all see him.
He'll come out like Groundhog Day, Sasquatch Day. He'll be emerging from his cave.
I wonder if they're real, because it's a race of them, right? That's the theory. Maybe they'll be in heaven.
Well, that's
I don't know.
theory.
Well,
Do they
I'm
have
going to
souls?
recruit him to do a sport. We'll put him on the
Rugby.
rug-
They'd be great rugby players, I bet.
Oh my goodness!
They're like
Can you
8 feet
imagine?
tall.
Or I'd take them to like Highland Games or something like that. Scottish Games. They can
Yeah, right.
toss those.
Go
big-
right in here. We
those
got all
big
these
logs.
trans species already competing against each other. So join in the group.
Right, but what I was gonna say is like the UFO thing. So that's like an anchor conspiracy theory. There has been disclosure that's been like soft from the federal government, and I can remember just watching the news one time, and they were showing a press conference with an outgoing, I don't believe it was Secretary of State, might have been a defense person, but I'm trying to remember who it was exactly. But they actually mentioned UFOs, and
Yeah.
in their exit speech, and it was almost in passing, and nobody, I was like, oh well, obviously, because it caught my ear, and I was like, what the, and I turned around, and then I started watching, and I was like, for sure they're going to ask in a press conference, like, or mention this. Nobody mentioned it.
Yeah,
What the-
that's what happens. Yeah, disclosure is an interesting subject. There's a documentary on a disclosure documentary on Netflix that's pretty good. I have my own theories behind disclosure and kind of why that's being mentioned, but you can. It's not too hard to find. World War II pilots have excuse me. Their military documentation. There's military documentation where, like, Air Force pilots in World War II, when they would write up their after-flight report, they would report seeing like glowing balls of light circling around their aircraft and going at incredible speed and turning on a dime, going like at that point way faster than the speed of sound. And there are like there's Russian documentation about similar things. So like there are reliable people saying that, yeah, I saw something weird and I can't explain it.
And going back to the records that we have available to us, this isn't something like the CIA necessarily hides. Like I just pulled up, going to the CIA files, you can go search flying saucers. And they have not only the documentation, this is from 1952.
Mm-hmm.
And they document it. They say it happens. They give the names of the people that gave the eyewitness testimony. They give related events that are happening in the area, air traffic control. It's not like they're trying to build a case against it, but it's almost as if they're trying to say we were aware of it. But in all of the documents that you find, it's this unsubstantiated.
Yeah.
And like the official reports is that there's no official report because it's not from us. These are just us documenting these unidentified flying objects.
Right. They're not really saying an opinion on it. They're just sending out the information.
And they also back up, like, when there is activity in the area, the U.S. government or whoever foreign agents that are involved in the airspace that's in question, they'll acknowledge, yeah, we were there. We witnessed lights as well. Period.
Yeah.
And that's the weird part where they're like, all right.
Well, just on that case, they released audio and video footage that I saw, and it wasn't doctored. It was from Air Force pilot. He had some encounter just about a year ago.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember that.
Remember
yeah.
that? Yeah, and it was like, what? And he was like freaked out by it, and he was, that you can hear the whole audio between him and the you can hear the audio between him and the ground control. When at the airport. But anyways, so like when you think about like how this information comes out and how people lose trust and all of that, and Cody said something that was really interesting. I've actually. And I'm keying off of what he said because he said something about how people will use conspiracies to discredit other people.
Yeah.
And just currently in the news, to like this past week, we saw well, now he's famous. If you haven't heard of him, you will soon. But Alex Jones was taken out of like major social media platforms. And he's labeled as a conspiracy theorist and someone who's dangerous. He's dangerous.
I'm not a slave.
That's right, and he's in the studio right now.
In the studio with us.
But yeah, so they're using it against him because they don't like the information that he's bringing forth, and he doesn't even have enough to prove some of the things that he says. but he must have something to say they don't like, or they're silencing him, right?
Yeah, I think the whole Alex Jones thing is interesting. I think that all of these elites could care less about him talking about gay frogs and putting putting babies in cows and stuff like that. I think that I think he is hitting on something specific that these big tech organizations don't like, and it's the hypocrisy in the tech companies, and it's also the maybe even some of the pedophilia stuff going on the elite level of society. You know, I mean, there's well documented cases of really high up parliament members in Britain being like, it comes out that they're pedophiles, and they've been pedophiles for like 15, 20 years, and people knew about it and didn't say anything.
Yeah, I was going to say just a small point, which you might disagree with me, but you can't because it's true, is that Alex Jones, we can move on after this if you want. But I was going to say everything that he always says, like if you watch his show, other than, someone making a montage of him saying crazy stuff, it's all documented in like mainstream news. So I think that he's not saying, again, like, his commentary is where everything goes off the rails if you don't like what he says. And he says crazy stuff, but he's just bringing it up like in like, hey, this is what you guys said. And even to get to use a different person, Mark Levin, when he was talking about all the FISA court stuff and the spying on Trump, they labeled him a conspiracy theorist, and they did all kinds of stuff. Like everybody was talking about him.
Now no one talks about it.
Right. And all he said was, hey, this is in the New York Times. You guys published this, and then a couple months later you published that they're doing this, and you did this. And all I did was looked at it and put it together and then read it as a piece. And then
it came out to be true.
And it came, it's still, yeah. But that's a perfect example, I think, of like a modern, you call him a conspiracy theorist, but Mark is not a conspiracy theorist. He's just like, hey, this is a conspiracy. The Obama White House was clearly doing some shady stuff. And the New York Times, they're not conspiracy theorists. They're not anything. It's mainstream.
They actually have a little bit of respect in media, a little bit.
From other people
And I
that
think-
all pack each other in the back.
Right.
One of the things they did with that, and try to limit Alex Jones' topic.
Yeah.
But one of the things is that they've associated him not only with the conspiracy theories and his horrible statements that he says about Sandy Hook. That's wrong. I never liked that. I mean, when I heard that, I was like, that's clearly he's making that up for somebody to pay attention. Like that's wrong.
So what did he say about Sandy Hook? That there
well,
was
everybody will know.
actors?
He basically said it was fake. It was hoax.
Yeah.
Crisis actors. That was wrong. Blatant.
Yeah.
Like all the guys here, we all agree that was wrong.
Right.
But the idea that he's now associated so closely with the Trump administration, it's low hanging fruit to kill him, to bring him off the platform, because he, like you said, when you analyze some of the things that he would do, he would just read the news. It wasn't as if he was drawing huge leaps. He was just basically reading the news and saying, hey, they're already saying they're doing this. They're already moving forward with their plan. And the word globalist can be found in another, conspiracy called the Illuminati.
Yeah.
So he's just saying things that we can all kind of see. He's just linking it back to the reality we live in. People don't like that.
I think one of the cool things one of the things that I enjoy about researching these things is because there are a bunch of weird things that people say that don't seem to make sense.
Pizzagate.
Yeah, Pizzagate's a great example. That there are certain things in the world that don't make sense. So I think one of the things that I enjoy about conspiracy theories is that they try to weave things together. They try to make sense out of something that doesn't seem to make sense. And that's, I enjoy that. Because I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Okay, I know that the U.S. government faked a terrorist attack, the Gulf of Tonkin, to give us reason to go into the Vietnam War. I know that. That's verifiably true. But when that is hypothesized in 2018, you're labeled someone who's hateful.
Will you talk about the Gulf of Tonkin?
Yeah. I will.
Yeah, share, because
Yeah.
I don't really know a whole lot about it, and I'm sure some of our listeners don't know much about it either.
Naval ship Maddox. Look, they can Google that if they're listening.
Naval ship Maddox.
Yeah, I'll let Ethan fill in the
Yeah.
blanks, but
So basically, the insinuation of this theory is that that America created or perpetrated a terrorist attack on its own ship in order to get engaged in the Vietnam War.
Let me read something. This
Yeah.
is, interestingly enough, this is from Infowars.com. They had an article, 30.
No.
Here we go. 33 conspiracy theories that were proven true. So here we go. This is their little write-up on the Gulf of Tonkin. The Gulf of Tonkin incident is the name given to two separate incidents involving the Democratic Republic of Vietnam and the United States in the waters of the Gulf of Tonkin. On August 2nd, 1964, two American destroyers engaged three North Vietnamese torpedo boats, resulting in the sinking of one of the torpedo boats. This was also the single most important reason for the escalation of the Vietnam War. After Kennedy was assassinated, the Gulf of Tonkin gave the country the sweeping support for aggressive military action against the North Vietnamese. I'm gonna scroll down. So this like pretty much didn't happen at all. Like there was an incident where a boat was attacked, like an American boat was attacked, and the American media, the American intelligence services said, like, this is what we need to go to war, but it never happened. So they pretty much made up a reason to go into the Vietnam War. Yeah.
And so that's, I guess, to use the term false flag that we used earlier, that's an operation that's done by, I guess, the government itself in order to rally the troops behind a certain outcome that they want.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we're on Vietnam. Martin Luther King was totally against involvement in Vietnam, and JFK was not for the involvement of more troops or even the advancement of war towards what we did there in that conflict. I'm not going to bring up why they died, but they are two people who died during that era, and they both were very adamant that there should not be any engagement there on a military stance.
Respected, and their voices were loud. People listened.
And their people, their assassins, are nobodies.
Yeah.
I mean, when you dig around, like maybe they went over to the United Kingdom, maybe they went to Mexico, maybe they had some international travel, maybe they were known by certain governments, maybe they were agents. That's why these conspiracies pick up some legs, because you have things to dig around with.
Yeah.
And that's why they are interesting, because of the time period. Well, this happened and that happened and these people died.
Like there's just enough of some kind of evidence that's coming through that is going to give you a reason to want to keep, looking into stuff. So like, oh, well, this happened and this actually points towards this direction. Now, we don't have any firm evidence, but it's definitely worth traveling down that road to try and figure something out. And what's crazy to me is like when I think about some of these conspiracies that we're talking about, because we're gonna start now. We're gonna jump into, because we understand what they're from and kind of what the methods are that other enemies will use, and people will try and use conspiracies to discredit. And somebody even told me on that note about discrediting is that conservative individuals really do care about what people think about them a little bit more than maybe liberal people do, in the sense of from a political standpoint. And so if you tarnish their character with some kind of crazy conspiracy thing and you label them with that, they'll actually back away for their reputation. So they use it as a tactic to try and silence a voice that they don't like. And that's important to take note of. So let's move away from like political government stuff. Let's start off with this kind of, or the kind of out there far ones. So Ethan, what's your favorite one that's kind of out there far that you want to talk about for a second?
How far are we talking? Because I mean, one of my favorites that I've been looking into recently is the giant fossils found in the United States. But I mean,
giant as in like human bones, but large.
Yeah, like giant skeletons being found in Indian burial mounds that are 8 feet tall, 9 feet tall, 7.5 feet tall. Some of which have 5 or 6 fingers on each hand and multiple rows of teeth in their mouth, like that kind of weird stuff. But I mean, as a Christian, that's not too out there because we know that giants existed. So
Yeah. So for
are we talking further than that?
well, I
'Cause
mean,
I can go further.
Go further.
well, talk. I mean, like if you talk about something you want to talk about as far as Nephilim are concerned, like or Nephilim. Wow.
You're projecting a little bit. Do you want me to
I'm
start talking
sorry.
about Nephilim?
Well, we're going to do an entire podcast on Nephilim at
All right.
some point here soon because that's one of my favorite topics to discuss as well. But what we're going to do is when you're talking about ancient, like even like because we know that the Bible in the Old Testament, it speaks in Genesis about a large race of people that and we find out in other parts of Scripture that they had 6 fingers. There's one we know that they're massive with the most famous story of all is Goliath. Most of our listeners know the story of David and Goliath the giant, and then we also have the king of Og. Later on, which his bed was 12 feet long, I believe, is what it says in Scripture. And so what you have is there's documentation from a reliable source. What we're missing are verified bones. So you're saying they're finding bones in America and different parts of the world.
Yeah, from a lot of the research that I've done, a lot of them are being found in Arkansas. So a lot of them are being found in Native American burial mounds. So the Native Americans would build these giant mounds and they'd bury their dead in it. It's just kind of a ceremonial thing. I can't do that justice. I don't know a lot of their culture and a lot of their religion, but some of these were dug up and they found skeletons in there that were like 7.5 to some were upwards of 8.5 feet tall.
Nice.
Yeah. Some of them were also found. I think they did some testing on some hair, and they also found some of them had like red hair, which was interesting. Yeah, so
They were Scottish Indians.
Scottish giants.
Super tall Scottish Indians. Did they find
They
them
were
killed?
Nords.
But yeah, so what were you saying about the Smithsonian in particular, the cover up, or
Yeah,
speak more to that?
I haven't done a whole lot of research on the cover up or the alleged cover up, but from what I've read, the accounts of the people who are actually finding these bones, they get heavily suppressed by quote I guess you could say the intellectual elites in that sphere, because I mean, as
Establishment archaeologists.
Yep, establishment archaeologists. I mean, if
They're everywhere, dude.
if the only reliable source of archaeology at least in America comes through the Smithsonian, then that's one point of failure, right? So if you have one organization that's controlling everything, then they can completely control the flow of information. So I can't talk a whole lot about the cover up because I haven't done enough research about it, but I mean, it makes sense to me because the idea that giant bones are being found would verify one of the very out there aspects of Scripture. So, I mean, that's not favorable to their worldview. It kind of contradicts. So,
Yeah, I always thought that if they ever found Noah's Ark, there'd be a whole lot of people that would be really their worldview would be totally rocked. Because they always are like, well, we can't believe that there was a worldwide flood. We can't believe that God would do such a thing and save only a handful of people, And I always thought, well, if we found it, now that is even a conspiracy in itself, the whole idea of Noah's Ark, because I've seen research where they've are predicting that they found it, and then governments won't allow them to go and excavate the area and try and get any evidence brought down from the mountaintops, and where it is, it matches what the biblical account would say where it would be or where it could be.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just kind of crazy how that works. What about you, Steven? What about you, buddy? You got some favorite conspiracies?
I want to hear Ethan. Since we were talking about so much,
You want to hear me?
I do, because you came here to talk. Why don't you talk? We talked a lot about MK Ultra.
Oh yeah.
And that's something that's I enjoy, or I don't know. There's so much to it. So what about I just know we were talking about that earlier. We were talking about the CIA in particular. So maybe give us some details on that, or.
Yeah, for sure. So MK Ultra, for those who who don't know, MK Ultra is not a conspiracy theory; it's a conspiracy fact. So, it is one of those that was whispered about for a long time, but then actually because of a Freedom of Information Act, it was uncovered on accident. So let me just read something for you here.
Well, MK, it stands for mind control, right? Isn't that what it's MC? But it'd be.
I don't know what the MK stands for. Actually,
Okay.
I know that there was a whole.
It's a CIA designation. That's how they found out it was CIA linked. But that's a type of transcription that they placed on these top secret files. So it might not actually mean anything. It's just one of those internal codifications for this is us.
But the MK Ultra is a mind control thing, right?
Yeah, they've come out and
Yeah.
They're trying to control people's thoughts.
Primarily, I mean, you'll probably dig into this more.
Yeah.
It was a response to Russian spies. It was a response to our enemies that we wanted to see if we can't put any skin in the game when it comes to controlling the outcome of what they wanted to do to us. Reverse psychological warfare.
I was going to say I'll just hop in real quick, that one of the interesting things about the CIA that makes them different from other intelligence agencies, I think, is the way that they don't necessarily, like, I read something, is the bottom line is they steal secrets. That's the whole, that's why they steal it. But they also are extremely inventive, and the way that they use things for other purposes is really interesting. So they're set up, like during the OSS was set up, and they just did stuff that no one was used to doing. And that's, it's not a podcast about.
One thing I want to add is that we live right outside of a place that's designated by an area called Dulles. And, the guy that's behind a lot of this CIA stuff that we're going to talk about is Alan Dulles, if I'm saying his last name right.
Yeah, that's
so that's just something to keep in mind. Like, we live in the backyard of this stuff. So for us, the political aspect of this might be just in the forefront because we see a lot of political natured commentary and news. And so throwing it back over to you, Ethan, to fill in the blanks here.
Yeah, so on a high level, MK Ultra, it was a set of experiments that were.
Maybe it's still going on.
Yeah. You never know.
Caught that.
Katy Perry. Yeah, it's true. I believe
The butterflies.
the Monarch program. So MK Ultra the MK Ultra program was a program where experiments on human subjects were intended to identify and develop drugs and procedures used in interrogations in order to weaken the individual and force confessions through mind control. The project was organized through the Office of Scientific Intelligence of the CIA and coordinated with the U.S. Army Biological Warfare Laboratories. The operation was officially sanctioned in 1953 and was reduced in scope in 1964. Further curtailed in 1967 and officially halted in 1973. The program engaged in many illegal activities, including the use of U.S. and Canadian citizens as its unwitting test subjects, which led to controversy regarding its legitimacy. MK Ultra used methods to manipulate people's mental states and alter their brain functions, including the surreptitious administration of drugs, especially LSD and other chemicals, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, verbal and sexual abuse, and other forms of torture, which I've heard include like electroshock therapy was one of the things that they would do. So,
wow.
From what I have found, they've tried to break down the psyche of a person to make them incredibly weak and incredibly suggestible.
Yeah, I was going to say, I heard, or I've read in research that I've done, that they basically, I guess the certain test subjects for certain parts of those things, that, basically they're looking for people that they could break down, and also use people that were easily suggestible in terms of had high creativity levels, I guess, however they did that, were highly intelligent. They looked for people, some of these things were just like, we can get into just random people, whoever happened to walk into the whorehouse that day, or, which is a crazy thing. But
I've heard they specifically targeted those who were outcast in society and those who were weak.
Right.
So they would target people who were like prostitutes, people in strip clubs, people in gay clubs in that era too, because those people were the outcasts of society. They weren't cared about by the mainstream really, and a lot of them were. I mean, I feel like if you go into a strip club, not that I've ever been, but if you go into a strip club, the chance that you find a woman in there that is weak and has been abused in the past is probably pretty high, you know?
Yeah.
I would say you're probably pretty close there.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's where they would go. They would search these types of people out.
I was going to say one of the interesting things, though, to kind of counteract that, well, I'll just say it like when, why can't I think of his name? Ted Kaczynski was one of the most, I guess, prominent people who claimed to be part of so basically
He was a subject for MK
he was
Ultra?
a subject when he was at Harvard, and that was exactly what they did. You know, they found this guy who was incredibly smart and basically broke him down
Wow.
super, and then that led to him having a complete mental break, or you know, whatever he would say. I never talked to him, but whatever he would say, and just completely changed him from his time at Harvard. And you know, he was a brilliant mathematician, and then just went to
So
what he did.
Do you think that the government might have been planning to try and create? Well, I mean, obviously they were trying to extract information break them down, and learn how to use tactics, how to get people to be manipulated.
Yeah,
so
that
they
was
could
like
get
their
them to
stated goal. Their stated goal was to break people down and pretty much be able to ask them whatever they want and them to get the answer,
Right.
no matter what. No matter if you have the most hardened Russian spy who's been in this business for 25 years, you get him in front of these CIA dudes, they could break him down and get him to talk.
just using mind tactics and things of psyche and nature.
Yeah, like putting you in a salt deprivation tank for 24 hours and then blasting like rock music in your ears for days on end, like that kind of stuff. That'll mess you up.
Would it be would the rock music be like? Would it be Creed or would it be like?
Oh, it'd be Creed.
It'd be Creed. Yeah, that's what I thought. Were they ever like? Did they ever want to? Because I've always heard too, connected to this, like they wanted to create super, like agents that would be able to, like they would just be able to instruct them go, like whatever. What's Jason Bourne or whatever? Is that something that they were trying to do too?
I was going to say part of that with when they were, I guess, you know, they did the unwitting operation like Northwoods, if that was the one I'm thinking of.
That sounds right, yeah. That sounds right.
Actually, I think that's something else. But they were also trying to do those secret spies, and I guess the thing with highly suggestibility and having these people broken down. I think it's important to know that in the beginning, the OSS, I guess, to get into a little bit of the history and the culture of early CIA, it came out of, they were all Ivy League guys. All the spying was seen as a very gentlemanly thing, which
like
is
statecraft.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And these people all came from Harvard, they're Yale, all these really big, insanely rich families, and that. But basically, yeah, if you could have like Jason Bourne, if you could, they have this thing called disassociation, which happens a lot, and this can open a whole other door if we could talk about it. But basically,
If we could, dun dun.
if we could,
We can.
well, I was going to say basically, like it happens with people that have PTSD. So that's one of the things, like kids that were sexually abused or stuff like that. They more like there's a higher chance that they suffer from disassociation, which basically means their brain cannot process what is happening at that specific time.
It's a defense mechanism.
It's a defense mechanism. The brain says, this is not me, this is not happening, and they completely just remove from their body almost and say, like, this is happening to a different person. And so I guess the theory behind that is that almost creates this second identity within a person.
Yeah, it's like a split.
And right, that hopefully they could trigger that using sounds or something like this, you know, stuff from the Manchurian Candidate. You know, they hear a word on the radio and all of a sudden they slip into this disassociated state or this other thing that theoretically wouldn't interact with the other one, or, you know, completely separate
So
person.
it's like a trigger thing.
Right. And so what better than a spy who doesn't know anything, and they literally, you can't interrogate them because they don't know. Or someone that you hear a song on the radio, and all of a sudden they're like, they snap and they just go kill someone. And
Right.
as soon as it's done,
And they don't even know they
don't
did
know
it.
they did it.
Yeah. It's super compartmentalized.
It's like we saw that in Civil War, the movie where they're sitting down with the character's name is
never saw it.
Well, like Avengers Civil War, you mean?
yeah. He's sitting down, he's reading the book to him, and he just trips. And he
What's his name? The guy with the one arm missing.
The Russian. Yeah.
yeah, basically we see it with that character. It's perfectly played out in media because it's accepted, it's true, or it's a conspiracy. It's true enough, and they used it in the plot line. You were hitting on a key point where they had this. The 1950s is when, going back to what I said earlier about Alan Dulles, when he came in, he actually came in with the idea that says that we're being witted essentially by the Soviet propagandists. Like they're doing things that we've never thought about doing. And so on record, this is a civilian who came into the CIA. And for the record, I love the CIA. I actually would rather have them as an entity in the United States than not have them. I see them as a necessary, not a necessary evil or good.
I agree to all those who are listening. I agree.
Yeah, same here.
I've done enough, or at least I think I've done enough to say that I believe in that institution and that actual
Their mission.
agency 100%. And that's not just because I think they're hearing and listening, but I just think that the mission can go off track when you have these authorized programs that really there's no parameters. Like they're creating the actual experiment right as they're going, and they might have an end goal. What Dulles said when he first came in is documented. I think it's 1953. He says, "I wonder, however," he's talking about the acknowledgement of psychological warfare already at play, and he says, "I wonder, however, whether we, United States, clearly perceive the magnitude of the problem, whether we realize how sinister the battle for man's minds has become in Soviet hands." He continued, "We might call it, in its new form, brain warfare." And so here's a civilian coming in with this high degree of understanding of post-war catastrophic remapping of the West, specifically in Europe, and how they had to sit down they knew that the Russians were the enemy, and they had to portion out Europe, and they knew that these guys were the enemy of an enemy, so they became an ally. But at the same time, they also understood that they had bigger goals, just like Germany did when they wanted to take over the world. And when he comes in, he's with the acknowledgement that the new war that we're going to be entering in will be a psychological one.
Yep.
And you'd have a lot of GIs who came back, a lot of POWs who came back. And they had either said that they saw the U.S. commit crimes, but they never really actually committed those crimes, and they were interrogated, and they're like, "You've been essentially tricked by the Soviets or tricked by your captors to say these things. You did not commit these crimes." And so with the U.S., they were like, well, how do they get our soldiers to confess the things that we know that they did not do? And so the response is these programs like the MK Ultra. Not only did they want to do something that mimicked it, it was reactionary. They were trying to gain a footing into the psychological battle.
Yeah.
In its early developments, you see a lot of people who came from Ivy Leagues who are very intellectual, and you just saw the whole world go to war. And you're like, how do we avert that? How do we stay the course without going to a nuclear holocaust? How do we win the minds of people who are psychologically being taken over through this essential, it's witchcraft or it's mind control?
Yeah.
So I think when you look at the very origins of it, I'd have to say that they wanted to do good, but when you put a good thing in the hands of people who you can't see every day, there's a sinful component, there's evil that's involved in all that. When you look into it, they did a whole bunch of unethical stuff that totally went out of the range of.
This actually plays into what you might see with the same way that cults work. It's all this brainwashing and this conditioning of a person to deprogram and reprogram them with certain information and certain new sets of desires, skills, and things that they would pursue. So you see it like immediately I think of in Hollywood the most famous cult that's running Hollywood with the Tom Cruise and
Scientology.
the whole Scientology Dianetics movement and that whole cult that is in there and things are the lid's blowing off on that and it just sounds very familiar to me. The MK Ultra, the techniques that they would use. Now I don't know if Scientology they put people in dark basements and salt chambers or whatever those things were and put rock music into their brains, but they definitely threw into their mind some things that they weren't thinking normally.
Are you going to say it?
I was going to say something on that topic. I like how you brought up Scientology. Have you ever heard of Operation Snow White?
Yep.
No, but I like her dwarves.
Get this. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a conspiracy fact right here. So Operation Snow White was a conspiracy that was an operation that was pushed by the Church of Scientology.
Great.
And, during the 1970s. And their goal was to purge unfavorable records about their church, which included infiltration and into the U.S. government. And they actually ended up stealing over, I think, about 136 government documents from both the U.S. government, foreign embassies, and consulates.
That's crazy.
So this church gathered together like an army to infiltrate governments to steal documents
About them.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's easier than PR, I guess. Just send people in to steal the documents.
Funny, as you were saying that, I remember reading about that when I was studying Scientology a few years ago to research its like bad actors. And I was pulled up. You can find it. It's the court case that was basically given out as the reason why this is exposed, and it's not a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy fact. Just the violation, just the actual. I'll just read that real quick. It says U.S. CS2, the law that they broke. It says in parentheses the conspiracy of theft against the government and its property, aiding and abetting obstruction of justice, false declaration before a grand jury, and interception of oral communications and written communications. That was in August 15th, 1979. That was the verdict that they came out as and said, like, you did this. And the people who were being sued is, the first woman, Mary Sue Hubbard. That's the
L. Ron Hubbard's wife or daughter or something?
Yeah, she inherited the empire after his demise. But there you see, this is not just, conspiracy out there in Weirdland. Like, Weirdland came in and tried to actually take away the conspiracy documents. Because they are weird.
That Sue Hubbard went to jail for 5 years for that.
Yeah.
So that's
one of the interesting threads in conspiracy that I enjoy and I think is most credible is the controlling and manipulating of information. Because a lot of these things are controlling. In that instance, the Operation Snow White, that was controlling opinions. Like it wasn't chemical mind control, it was information control, which down the process of how information and opinions work, it is mind control. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
The idea that Operation Mockingbird's a good example. I think it was the CIA, right, Rosey? Go ahead.
Yeah. So I just was going to say that. Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. I'm just reading. Operation Mockingbird was an alleged large-scale program of the United States Central Intelligence Agency that began in the early 1950s and attempted to manipulate news media for propaganda purposes. It funded student and cultural organizations and magazines as front organizations. And I was going to say, it's kind of interesting that, this to kind of harp back on something that we were talking about as a... So basically what we have here is the CIA funding student newspapers, organizations. Just going to say, Soros, Black Lives Matter. It's still mirroring reality to this day.
He said it.
Open society.
Yeah, but in particular with this, one of the things you were talking about, the ideological subversion of the Russians, and this was something that was all the Russians knew, and one of the whistleblowers or anything like that, Yuri Brezhnev,
Brezhnev, right? Yeah,
Yabba-dabba-doo.
Right.
He came out and he said, "Yeah, this is what the KGB has been doing for years, decades, has been trying to infiltrate college campuses, get these leftists cultural Marxism and basically to destroy the. And we talked about this earlier on a different podcast, and basically break down American society. So it would make sense, again, something like this, that the CIA would want to take different matters into their own hands and fund something that's anti. You know what I mean? So like stuff like that. When you look at it from afar, you can take this as, oh, they're funding Fox News and all this stuff still today, and all these other news organizations and all that. And
Fox News is run by leftists. It's true.
Oh,
I believe
Murdoch's son now. Yeah, that's a whole other thing. But it makes sense, like in the context when you look at something like this, is like, oh yeah, they're doing the exact same thing that the Russians are doing, or the Soviets back in that day. Same thing now. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing's changed, right?
No. Which is, yeah, it makes sense, and you look at that, and if they're doing that, it makes sense that we could do that.
The idea that the CIA this is something that you can go back and you see. They went out and fished for journalists and people who are in the media who would be willing to essentially co-sign on to talking points. I mean, you kind of just turn on the TV and you look to one network, and they say they're not owned by the same people, but they have the same talking point. And even if you can get the parent company down and you say, oh, they're owned by the same people, they have the same talking point. And obviously we have the documentation to show that the CIA, and at least in the United States...
Alex Jones, we have the documentation.
But the interesting point about the Mockingbird operation is that it came down from the head. We see that. And that, again, was Cord Meyer and Alan Dulles, which was later led by a guy named Frank Weiser, became the head of the CIA. Like, if you go back and just look into this comes from the top down. So, like I said earlier, I like the CIA, but depending on who's in control of it, I mean, they have done some pretty questionable things when it comes to, like...
In the name of protection and in the name of keeping America safe and all of...
Yeah, I don't want to end up in a gulag. So,
right.
This is a response to that, I think, in a good way. I mean, I can argue that
I'm sure they could give you reasons why they did it that would probably be pretty convincing.
Yeah, I think
they
so
would
too.
use their MK Ultra techniques to yeah. What's up, Ethan?
I think going back to what you mentioned earlier, I think it's still probably going on. Going back to two of the topics, media control, which we're talking about now, and then MK Ultra. Have you guys seen the Al Roker quote MK Ultra video?
Oh, there's so many of just not even him, but I saw that earlier today as well. It's
the Al Roker one is insane. So it's Al Roker and like two other hosts are doing some kind of it's the
Today Show.
Today Show, yeah. Yep. So have you seen this, Cody?
Yeah, I've seen them all. It's unfortunate.
It's weird.
Spend hours looking at those ones. The MK Ultra is kind of like
there's so many of them.
It's addicting.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you mentioned
part of their
was
technique.
It's true.
I said that.
They infiltrated YouTube. One of the things that you mentioned was the idea of a split personality.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you mentioned this, but it's really common when you read about this stuff about a trigger word.
Yeah.
Trigger.
So the trigger word, which is talked about a lot, it's essentially what causes you to hop over into the other personality, like the disassociated personality. So in a nutshell, you would, like during one of these experiments, you would get broken down mentally and psychologically via torture, electroshock, sensory deprivation, etc. That would cause a break in your psyche. And then somehow these people would program you to these people would program you to automatically hop into your other disassociated self. So in this video, Al Roker is with these co-hosts, and one of the hosts says the word Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
No way.
And
really?
then
That's
just
the
in
keyword?
normal conversation. Yeah. So and he just goes, you can see him, he just goes blank stare.
Wow.
And doesn't say anything.
And his head kind of turns, like he's looking at them, and he just looks straight at the camera. And
It's very weird, man.
Yeah.
It's very weird.
I'll have to Google that.
Yeah, you should. Absolutely. You need to. We'll watch it all after we get done. But it's weird. So, and you can see this. There's a lot of these videos, like where people will being videotaped, and a word will be said, and they will just blank out.
So they have trigger response words. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say to kind of go onto this a little bit, speaking of trigger words or anything like that, this is an interesting little connection so there's a couple large scale, assassination attempt, not large scale, but whatever. So Mark David Chapman, who killed John Lennon, so he was found with a copy of the Catcher in the Rye that he had written. This is my statement, right? So he was found with that, and I think right after he killed him, he started reading from it, and that's when they found him.
Yeah,
and I'll go with the next two. John Hinckley Jr., who shot Ronald Reagan, was also found. The book was in his hotel room. And Lee Harvey Oswald, who obviously killed JFK.
Obviously, though?
I meant obviously that you know who I'm talking about with JFK. It was reported that one of the only 4 books that he owned was Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah, there's a lot of connection, a lot of pop culture connections, but there's a lot of pop culture themes used in MK Ultra experiments, allegedly. One of them is Catcher in the Rye. I've heard that a lot.
Alice in Wonderland.
Alice in Wonderland is exactly so.
And The Wizard of Oz.
And The Wizard of Oz. Yep. So these are used as trigger words, in a way. The idea, at least Alice in Wonderland, is like she plunges into the other universe.
Yeah.
Like she plunges into like her disassociated self.
There's a pretty big parallel there you can make pretty easily.
And I mean, the guy who wrote Alice in Wonderland wasn't he on acid or LSD when he was writing that? Yeah. So there's that connection too, which is because LSD
And his book,
was like,
when you read it,
I think it was mescaline.
Oh, it's
a lot
crazy.
earlier because they didn't have LSD until the 40s.
OG.
I think.
OG.
He was doing some crazy
until the CIA
stuff.
made it.
Until the CIA made it. Yeah.
They might have, dude. For real.
One of the things, I don't know, we talk about this stuff forever, but the idea that, us as believers, we believe in Jesus, and this is one of those areas where in conspiracy theories, I don't like them as much, maybe, as I gave on tonight. I like the ones that have come from fiction to fact. Like the ones that I spoke on a lot were the ones that you can prove that
Right.
you go to a primary source, CIA, there's a primary source, but you go to the documentation that's on it, and you can sift through it, and you're like, oh my, this is available. Like this stuff happened, and this is like horrible. We have our president acknowledging that these things nefariously were done, unethically done, and, apologizing. And I'm in my mind as we're thinking about this, there's one passage is in my head just kicking around, and it's 1 John chapter 5, verse 19. Speaking before that in verse 18, says, we know that no one who is born of God sins, and he who is born of God keeps him, and the evil one will not touch him. Verse 19 is where I want to kind of focus on. It says, we know that we are of God, and that the whole world lies in the power of the evil one. I mean, there's a lot of darkness in this world. We don't even have to acknowledge that passage to realize the darkness exists, and it's pervasive. And it says that in this revealed scripture for those that are in Christ and those that are trying to seek through the confusing stuff that maybe we've spoken about, is that behind a lot of this, not all of it, but behind a lot of this is this evil person. It's Satan, and the whole world lies in the lap of the evil one.
Yeah.
That for me is convincing enough, not only to look to where we've already exposed darkness, but just imagine how much, take the government out, take the conspiracy idea out, and how dark this world is, and how we see cults in the Bible, blood cults, infanticide cults, where they murder children over and over again, and they're worshiping demons and they don't even know it.
Now it's just legal in most states.
Yeah. So
child sacrifice.
there's just, and a lot of this is anchoring on like there is present darkness, and he is evil, and he's it says here the whole world lies in his lap, and that's something to keep in mind, even if some of this stuff has sounded too far out there, or why are you talking about conspiracies? Doesn't the Bible
We didn't
say
even
not
talk
to?
about the crazy ones.
Yeah, we
No.
stayed pretty tame, man.
But
You
for
want to
those
talk
that
about
maybe
Hollow
like
Earth? I can do Hollow Earth.
Hollow Earth.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just want to hit on one of the things that you were saying real quick. Why do Christians get it? Like, why is me as a Christian, why do I enjoy this? Why do I enjoy reading about these things? One of the reasons why I see some credence in some of these things is because I, as a Christian, have a fundamental distrust of the if there's a consensus, I don't necessarily agree that it's the truth because it's a consensus. I don't agree that this world was created by coincidence. I believe that a all-knowing, all-powerful, perfect God created it. So anyone who tells me otherwise, I don't trust what they're saying. So I think that there's something about being a Christian that lends itself to distrusting certain information, certain powers, because we know that this world is on a certain level in the enemy's hands. And
I mean, just because a bunch of people all agree that this is the way it goes, that's what you're getting at, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
This is all people
Yep.
doing it, not necessarily.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
I just have a distrust for, like, just because someone tells me something doesn't mean that I believe it. I think there's a lot of greed in on the top level of society, and I think there's a lot of sin. If we could talk about pedophilia in the elite sphere, I think there's a lot of that going on. Maybe even some child sacrifice, but I believe that man is fundamentally sinful, and when you give sinful men a lot of power, a lot of money, then terrible things happen.
Yeah. I was going to say that just one interesting thing that many people may not know if they're not into conspiracy theories. I hang out with obviously you guys, and then I have like a separate group of friends that are all hardcore Catholics, and they're not really open to conspiracy theories. So maybe we can do a whole other one. And that's like this huge rift, and it's just kind of funny. Even within, I guess, Christian circles, it seems like us heretic Protestants are more apt to question authority, maybe a little bit,
so,
or
yeah.
Pass down authority. So I think you're getting there.
Yeah.
Seeds
It
of the
could be that
Reformation.
The whole term Protestant is protestate. We're protesting. We are reformers in that sense, that we don't want to just stay with the status quo. We want to turn the world upside down if it's not pointing and orienting itself back to Christ. Which
Maybe the Protestant Reformation was a conspiracy that was conspired by.
It's
that's
actually the
something.
language. The word propaganda comes from the Catholic Church in response to a lot of what was happening, where people were questioning the status quo. And I don't know the Latin word. Maybe your Catholic friends, if they hear this, the word propaganda comes from a positive stance in the Latin, where they're trying to re-educate the populace because they're starting to read their Bibles and they're starting to
Think for themselves, maybe.
Get their pastors and their priests telling them what the Bible say, and they're starting to understand what Martin Luther eventually came to, is that we are the priesthood of all believers. It's a huge spark that'll happen when the Holy Spirit's allowed, not only on the authoritative level of an organization as big as the Catholic Church. You're getting me on a whole nother conspiratorial.
I just want to say I love all my Catholic friends and I respect you.
Yeah, me too. But I see that as an area where maybe within the Protestant, or at least in this group, I can't speak for all of this because I don't think it's necessary for us to have a category that approves this. But like there is within us this idea that we acknowledge the full sinfulness of man. He is totally depraved. But in that, there's redemption, and we see this darkness, and it corresponds back to our worldview that says, wow, that's possible because there is this capable person called Satan, and he has already conspired against God.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on that, Cody, and I just want to tag onto that if I can. Conspiracies are about unknown and darkness. Like there's things that are hidden and things that are unknown. So when you think about like Sasquatch and UFOs and aliens and some of these things, there's like unknown factors to that. And then there's the darkness side of things, where there's the evil side of mankind, where greed and lust for control and all of those things will cause them to develop things like MK Ultra and cults that would come into play, like Scientology and things like that. And so, but when you look at what Jesus came to do, and this is something for a Christian to hold on to and cling to, and this is what I want to encourage any believer that's listening to this today, is that Jesus made it very clear who he was through every aspect of his ministry when he was walking on the earth, and the predictions beforehand that claimed who he would be, he fulfilled. And then there's still things to happen in the future which have conspiracy in them as well, which we'll talk about on another podcast, the end times. But one thing that Jesus did clearly say to the Jews that would believe, he says, if you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And I think it's important to remember that darkness and unknown things need light and truth to them to be revealed so that you can understand what is right and what is wrong, and what is true and what is false. And I think that Jesus makes it clear that he is the way, he is the truth, he is the life, and he is the light of men, and he is the living word of God. And so we have access to something that people think about often but don't know how to put feet to, don't know how to make it become real. But I still enjoy a good conversation about Sasquatch. I would love to see a Yeti or a Sasquatch or whatever you want to call them now. I don't know. They change the name it used to just be Bigfoot. So
because they're different hominids.
right,
It's
true.
They are different.
Different sounds. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I mentioned earlier to you guys before the podcast was that one of the most scandalous conspiracies, to wrap it up on a good level of, this is some stuff, if you're wanting to look into a conspiracy theory, it happened from the very beginning. Satan conspiring not only within his own counsel when he fell, but conspiring within his heart to destroy man. And Acts 4, verse 25 and 28, you get this quoting Psalm 2, David speaking about what he was experiencing as a man, but David pointing as a type to Jesus. It gives us this amazing insight as to what a conspiracy looks like when you come up against God. And God knows all things, sees all things, and he says, why did the Gentiles rage? This is Acts 4:25, and the people's plot in vain. So there's that conspiracy corresponding with an evil intention. The kings of the earth set themselves up, and the rulers were gathered together against the Lord and against his anointed. So this is in the book of Acts where Peter's preaching to the Jews and those who are there present, speaking to them about the gospel, but he's giving them the prophetic word that was fulfilled right in front of them. He's using the fact that Psalm spoke about this conspiracy that they were a part of, and he says, for truly in this city there were gathered together against your holy servant Jesus, whom you anointed. Both Herod, whom you anointed, both Herod and Pontius Pilate, along with the Gentiles and the peoples of Israel, to do whatever your hand and your plan had predestined to take place. So here you have in the Psalm 2, it's being spoken of as the nations come together. And here Peter says not only the nations, but even those who would co-sign themselves as the people of God, Israel. And when you go further down, you see just the idea of this throughout the Bible, that Joseph is a model of showing how God used this horrible situation. Because for you, Joseph saying this in Genesis chapter 50, he says, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And the rest of that verse in Acts, going back to that, it says Acts 4:29, it says, and now God looked upon their threats, and he grants to your servants to continue to speak your word with all boldness while you stretch out your hand to heal them. And with signs and wonders they are being performed through the name of your holy servant Jesus. And the key point I wanted to point out in that is that Satan's not stopping any of his conspiring against God at all. After he did his horrible act of raging in the hearts of the nations, and specifically coming after Jesus when he showed up in Israel, coming after the leaders and inspiring them and bringing them on to this evil plan to destroy Jesus, God worked it all out for good. And I think the little tagline is that God not only works it all for good, but even in that which is evil, right in front of us, the present evil of our reality that we walk in every single day, is that we are not able to see the unseen. We're not able to see what God is working out on our behalf. And I think the whole testimony of the gospel revealed to us in Scripture shows us that it's necessary for us to rely on God even when we see MK Ultra. And we see these horrible conspiracy theories every single day that you can go back and verify, is that God will work through some pretty terrible stuff. And I'm just thankful for that. I think it's an amazing thing to end on,
Well, you
'Cause
see conspiracies happening like in the Book of Esther, Mordecai and Haman and trying to conspire to kill all those Jews, and in that time he had a plan: build the gallows, trick them, get them killed. There's biblical conspiracies happening all around us, man. This is awesome. So, Ethan, is there anything else you wanted to add?
Do you guys want to talk about Hollow Earth?
I tell you what, here's what I'm thinking. I think we need to have a whole nother podcast on some of these
Crazier ones?
Yeah, some of the crazier ones, because I'm actually into the Hollow Earth one. I've started, and the Flat Earth. I mean, I got a guy that just sends me Flat Earth stuff all the time.
I'm sorry, I'll stop doing that.
Thanks, Steven. But I saw the most hilarious meme. It was a picture of like the solar system, and it had like the sun and then like each planet as they went out, and when it got to Earth, it was like a flat disc, and everything else was round. And it goes, I hate when that happens.
Well, they're just projections on the sky dome, Turner. Come on.
All right. So there's
Bluebeam, Project Bluebeam.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. We should talk about that one.
All right. So I mean, we've been going on for an hour and 15 minutes. There's a lot more to talk about on this. That's it. We can keep going if you guys want.
U.S. government stole dead bodies for radioactive testing after I mean, we haven't even started, Turner.
That's why I think this could be a series of podcasts that we could do, part 2, part 3, part 4, about different conspiracies. And someone still needs to show me a good picture of Nessie. I mean, here's the craziest thing I heard about Nessie, the Loch Ness, right? That there's a portal underneath the lock, and that it only opens up every certain amount of time, and this creature is some sort of related to some kind of dragon or so forth, and it's got these mystical powers, and it comes through the gateway, this portal, and shows up and sticks its head out and then goes back under. That's why it's been like every 100 years that they get a picture of it or they see it or something like that, I mean, I don't know how.
That's crazy.
I'm
saying that's crazy.
I agree. It's crazy
That's
too.
crazy.
When I heard the explanation, I was just like, "What? You're reaching."
See, I've heard that Bigfoot is a time traveler, and they also have their own language.
That's a common thing, yeah.
That's yeah.
So
like
why would it be?
Bigfoot and the Greys are in like a competition, along with the reptilians who.
Oh, the reptilians.
Oh, the reptilians. Yeah, there's the reptilians, the Greys. They also say there are some whites too.
Some whites.
Yeah, and then the
Pass.
Bigfoot. They say that they're all like battling for like control over humanity, and like the Bigfoots are the good guys.
So are they just letting us exist until
They help us out behind the scenes that we don't know about.
Bigfoots are like the Marvel superheroes that we don't
Exactly.
in real life.
Yeah,
Was
really.
Harry and the Hendersons, was that in Bigfoot?
I'm not sure.
He was a Sasquatch. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't know what that is?
No.
What?
You didn't see that movie?
You had a horrible childhood.
Yeah.
The Station Wagon.
That was my favorite movie,
That was a great movie.
especially the wagon.
Right.
The wooden wagon.
I had one like
Rosey,
that.
You got to watch that.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Yeah. All right. So we'll have to continue this conversation. We'll have to continue these conspiracies. I love some of these government ones that we talked about, MK Ultra, and the different ones that happened, and the connecting the CIA to things, the nefarious acts, and hopefully, we'll be able to unpack some of these as we move on, and it's just an interesting thing. It's fun to talk about.
We got an agent right here, man.
We got an agent in our midst. That's so funny. I know I got to be careful. My dad was retired CIA, so he worked. So I got to be careful. I might.
You never retire, Turner.
Look, right? No, right.
Whenever they call.
Just don't say the key word, and we'll all be good here.
Don't say Holy Spirit.
Oh no. That's
just-
funny that they would use that.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Evil.
Before we go, I
Yeah.
will just throw this out as my saying goodbye, is that look up the number of Mormons that are in the CIA. It is an overwhelming
Is it? Well, I know.
population.
Really?
Considering their numbers. Yep, just going to say that.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Cool.
Very goal oriented and works oriented, you'd say.
Mhm. They have a goal. Well,
Very,
Cody.
very good dressers too. They have the dress code down pat.
They do.
Mr. Mormon.
All the way down to the underwear. All right.
The anonymous guy.
Spectacles.
Yeah. Cody,
awesome show. Awesome hanging out with you. Rosey, same
Appreciate-
thing. Ethan, thanks for coming in, man.
Yeah,
come back.
thanks for having me.
We'll have you back. We'll continue this conversation.
Holla word.
I'm just getting started, guys.
Just gonna start
It's
the
gonna get fun.
conversation.
He's gonna stay here all
He's
night
just
by
gonna
himself.
start. We'll do another episode, guys. This has been the All Out War podcast, and we're so glad you listened. And
Appreciate
we
you
will
guys.
catch you next time. See ya.
Thanks for listening to the All Out War podcast today. We hope you enjoyed the episode. If you want to know more, you can visit us on the web at alloutwar.us, or you can find us on Twitter at alloutwarcast. Hey, thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next time.